thoughts. Trample was really significant in the matchup. SCGLive obviously providing that, and then some removal spells, Valor Stance especially, were critical in allowing Andrew to take the match.
Patrick, I'm going to come with a tough question right away. Who's got the better hair here?
Andrew Boswell.
Oof. I'm going to disagree. I think Corey's got a nice, it's kind of a nice fro. I like it quite a bit. Now, I want to make sure you heard me. Hair, not arms. Because Boswell never loses that one.
I stand by my initial assessment.
Fair enough. Game number 1 underway here. Sansom Citadel for Boswell. Temple plenty here for Baumeister. Very important match between these two players, all kidding aside. Boswell with a win here. Likely locked up top 8 right away. And Brad clearly rubbing off on his brother. It's funny because everyone knows who Brad Nelson is, player of the year, multiple Pro Tour top 8, Grand Prix champion, arguably the best standard player in the world. His brother is a very, very good Magic player who just doesn't play all that much anymore. He took a pretty long time off, I think about 2 years before deciding to come to this tournament. Brad said, you know what, I'll take you to one tournament this year. Where do you want to go? Corey obviously lives in North Dakota. He said, get me the heck out of here. Get me to Miami where it's warm. I'll come down and play some Magic, and he is making the most of it. No buys, by the way.
And this is great because the last time that I saw Corey, he was struggling in the grinders the night before. I watched him lose a match to Kevin Jones, and Jessica Aggro does not seem like a good matchup for this deck. But didn't need any buys here. 10-0-2.
Boswell to a fantastic start. Fleece Main Lion and Rakshasa Death Dealer. Corey with the Voyaging Satyr. Certainly not a bad start. Now here's a copy of Pelucranos, immediately putting Boswell to the test after a removal spell. Now Boswell's removal, he does have quite a bit. 4 Heroes Downfall, 3 Valor Stance, and an Obzon Charm. So a 5/5 is certainly not the end of the world, but if he doesn't have one, that will put the brakes on.
I believe Boswell does have a downfall here at the ready.
He's tapping some mana. Looks like he's going to take 1 to cast this downfall. So Pelucranos is going to bite the dust, which will allow Boswell to attack for 5 points of damage. Baumeister already down to 12. Manic Influence will be the land, and Boswell will pass the turn back over to Corey, who will take a draw for his 4th turn, and it is a forest.
This will be a really solid spot to have Whisperwood Elemental.
Well, he's tapping 5 mana, so it seems like he does, and he will play Whisperwood Elemental, which means it'll allow him to manifest as well. Heck of a card, isn't it?
Yep. Been very impressed. One of those kind of good at all stages of the game sort of cards.
Boswell's hand here, Hero's Downfall, and Offense of the Foremost, Boon Satyr.
Sweet when you're winning, sweet when you're losing. Sweet when you got 5 mana, sweet when you got 50 mana.
Yep.
It's a very powerful card.
Now, Boswell's goal in this match, as we saw when he played against Adam Jurczyk to kick off today, is don't let him get set up with Master of the Unseen, with Genesis Hydra, with Pelucranos, none of that stuff. Keep pushing the gates down. Don't ever let the Devotion deck get their feet set, because once they do, there's no coming back.
Exactly. The only range that Boswell really has in the deck is SCGLive. There's no flying, so once the board gets locked up, that's about it.
Hero's Downfall is going to take care of Whisperwood Elemental. Into the red zone comes Boswell. He's willing to trade here, his Death Dealer, with this creature. And they will trade. So Boswell trying to continue to force through damage. Courser of Crufix was the manifest creature. 3 damage does come across, so Baumeister's down to 9, and he'll take a draw.
So if Boswell's willing to trade the Death Dealer there, I assume his hand has to be flushed with some expensive spells.
Well, he does have a Boon Satyr and Offensive. Those are the last 2 cards in his hand.
That makes sense. If his man's going to be tied up doing other things one way or the other. He also has Fleece Main Lion in play that he can go monsters with, so... I was a little surprised by that trade, but most likely it's just to free up mana to do other things. And since the manifest creature turned out to be Courser Crufix, I'm sure he's actually pretty thrilled he got off the table.
Corey going to go into the tank here, try to figure out what the best line of play is given the situation. He's going to go the Pelucranos route. Untap a Temple, plenty with Voyaging Satyr. Followed up with a Fleece Main Lion. So he's built a nice board here, and he'll pass the turn back. Boswell going to untap. See what he can add to his hand. Again, Anafenza and Boon Satyr in the grip, and it looks like he's drawing a copy of Land of War Waste. So not a bad draw, because land number 5 is actually pretty good.
Well, Boswell needs to keep up the pressure. He cannot stop at this point, so... he's likely going to have to play land number 5 and just attack and see how Corey blocks. But I don't think he can say go. I also don't think going monsters on Fleece Main is acceptable this turn because Pelucranos still gets an opportunity to block. And with Voyaging Satyr, Pelucranos in play, Devotion already at 4 starting it next turn.
And we're going to see what the boss can figure out here. Might just be a Boonsader type turn. Might just be a deploy and offensive type turn. Maybe set up for further turns. But the longer the game goes, the worse it gets here for the boss. So he's just going to play his 5th land and come into the red zone here.
Yeah, I think he just has to do this. He doesn't have the opportunity here to wait much longer. Corey can just block with Pelucranos. That will cause Boswell to play the Boonsader, which will just trade. Corey then gets to untap, potentially go monsters with the Fleece main line and lock out the board. This is all bad news for Boswell, but that being said, this is the best he can do given the circumstances.
Baumeister's going to survey the board. A difficult decision indeed here for Corey. Our lone undefeated player in the tournament at 10-0-2. Certainly has a decision to make.
Well, now the question is, what cards are you playing around here? Because the onboard trick of go monsters with Fleece main line suggests you just put Pelucranos in front.
Well, there is the onboard trick, and that's the one he's going to make. Boswell's going to take a little bit of damage here thanks to Manic Influence to bestow Boonsader. So that's going to make Fleece main a little bit bigger. But at the end of the day, Fleece main will trade with Pelucranos, Boonsader will be left over, and it's a lot easier for Corey to deal with a 4-2 than maybe a monstrous Fleece main line.
Well, he's already got it in play if he wants to by going monsters with Fleece main line.
There's a Courser. Take a look at the top cards. A copy of Genesis Hydra. Right now, Nykthos would be plus mana. It's a big draw for Corey next turn, assuming he gets there. I'd be surprised if he didn't, given what's in Boswell's hand, which is just an Anafenza right now.
At 9, he has the opportunity of trading or chump blocking, whatever he deems to be a better play. So Corey's going to be able to get to next turn, and that Genesis Hydra will probably turn this game around fully for him.
There's a Mastery of the Unseen. He'll untap Temple upon the Voyaging Satyr, play an Elvish Mystic, pass the turn back. So Baumeister's empty-handed with a Genesis Hydra on top of his deck. Boswell's going to take a draw step here. It's a copy of Rakshasa Death Dealer to go along with the Anafenza that's in his hand. But Corey's starting to get his feet set now. Here comes the Boonsader.
And this is a pretty hopeless spot for Boswell, but he just has to keep plugging along with these attacks.
Yep.
And from Corey's side, really the only thing you're worried about at this point is Siege Rhino getting you. So I think no blocks is unacceptable. I don't actually care what he blocks within the spot. I'm fine chump blocking with a Mystic, in fact.
That actually looks like what he's going to do, yeah.
But he can't take the hit.
Yep. And I agree with you. You don't want to open yourself up to any nonsense. There's Anafenza. There's the Death Dealer. Pass the turn back. Will Boswell. Now he's empty-handed. Now Corey knows what he's drawing, which is Genesis Hydra. Master of the Unseen on top of the deck. And he can make a large Hydra here if he'd like to. Nykthos is going to tap here for 4 green. Voyaging Satyr will untap. -2 + 4 is 6. 7, 8. So it looks like they have a Genesis Hydra here for 6. And so take a look at the top 6 cards. One of them is going to join the party here. Banishing Light among the options here for Baumeister. Also has a Courser of Crewfix in there too, so a decision to make here for Corey.
Banishing Light's pretty attractive here. The second Courser I don't think offers too much. I suppose it is another blocker and more devotion, but now Corey empty-handed.
Looks like he is going to go with Banishing Light.
I mean, this is all fine.
Yeah.
You know, and all these cards do approximately the same thing. I guess getting the Death Dealer off the table because it's an annoying blocker is not bad for Corey in this spot, so he can start getting on the offensive.
Top card now is Elvish Mystic. Saw Banishing Light take care of Anafenza. See if Corey's comfortable with any attacks here. Looks like he is with Fleece mainline.
I like attacking with Fleece main line here because Andrew's not looking to block, and Corey's not looking to block with Fleece main line next turn.
So it's 9-9. Boswell reaching for some mana here. Perhaps it's Valorous Stance. It is. It's timely. That'll take care of Genesis Hydra. It's a big draw there for Boswell. This will allow him to do exactly this, which is attack with 2 creatures. Of course, our Crewfix the only creature that can block right now. As Fleece mainline got into the red zone. And blocking Rakshasa Death Dealer is probably not ideal, so perhaps this just trades with the Boon Satyr. Boswell looks like he's going to pump once, so he'll deal Baumeister 4 points of damage. And Corey's board is being whittled away a little bit here.
Yeah, and Boswell knows that this is still a bad spot. This game is probably a lost cause, but he's still, there's still probably a conceivable run of draws that allow him to win this game.
We're in Baumeister's upkeep. He knows the top card of his deck's a Elvish Mystic, so it looks like in the upkeep he's going to manifest. And so now he'll get to draw a card. And conveniently, he has enough mana to unmorph Elvish Mystic. Looks like Corey's draw this turn was a Genesis Hydra.
Yeah, I mean, the most straightforward line of play is this: attack Andrew down to 4, unmorph your creature. If Andrew draws nothing, he's dead on board. If he draws something, he still can't attack.
Yep.
It basically has to be Siege Rhino for him to continue to play.
Looks like Corey's going to unmorph right now, too. Or at least considering it. He'll wait. We'll go back Boswell's way. You said it's got to be a Siege Rhino, so let's see what the draw is.
And I don't think Siege Rhino even results in a win. That's just the requirement for the game to go on.
Oh,
turn.
yes. Boswell going to survey some things here. Just a Rakshasa Death Dealer on his side. A painful mana base too. You see the 2 copies Mana Confluence and a Llanowar Waste. The damage is certainly added up, but it's been a close game through and through. Didn't get a great look at what he's drawn this turn, but it looks like he's starting to reach for mana a little bit. That's another copy of Death Dealer. He'll have to go down to 3 to cast it. Boswell will pass the turn back. If he's putting on the brakes, Corey's got to be thrilled.
Yep. The moment that Andrew stops attacking is the moment where Corey basically has it locked up.
Corey going to take a look at some things. I think maybe he's considering unmorphing his manifest creature, but he elects not to. Now he's trying to figure out, do I have any attacks that can just make it lethal right now?
Well, even setting aside making it lethal, if you are able to knock Boswell down to 1, that means the 2 copies of Mana Confluence are off the table, meaning Siege Rhino is no longer castable. And at that point, I don't think there's really anything that Boswell's drawing to.
Yeah.
He can also no longer bestow Boon Satyr.
Closes a lot of cards
Yeah.
off. I mean, Corey realizes this, and he's coming into the red zone with everything. So there are your blocks.
This attack doesn't have to be lethal for it to be really good for Corey.
Yep. He's ready to let damage resolve. Both Death Dealers will bite the dust. Boswell going to go down to 2. There is a Forest. This is a Genesis Hydra for 4.
You can see Boswell didn't even bother to try to save his Death Dealers because he knows that, again, Siege Rhino is the only thing that gives him even the faintest of hope. and he needs to be able to cast it.
Voyaging Satyr is the hit with the Genesis Hydra. Boswell wanted to see the other 3 cards for information, and we'll move on to the next game. Corey Baumeister going to win this game here over Andrew Boswell. Green-White Devotion up a game over Obzon Agros. We turn to the sideboards, and we've seen Boswell's a couple times with the matches we've watched, as well as his deck tech. He's got 4 Thoughts. He uses 3 Nissa World Wakers, 3 Drown in Sorrows, 2 Glare of Heresy, 2 Back to Nature, and a Murderous Cut.
So I definitely like the Murderous Cut in this matchup. Just more creature removal is going to be good. I think the 2 copies of Back to Nature can come in here because you're looking at Mastery of the Unseen, Banishing Light, and Courser Crufix. Unclear if Boswell's going to bring it in. The rest of the sideboard is not really that appealing to me. Maybe Thoughtseize comes in.
What do we see on Corey's side?
2 copies of Nissa Worldwaker, 3 copies of Boon Satyr, 2 copies of Reclamation Sage, 2 copies of Valorous, Glare of Heresy, 4 copies of Valorous Stance, and 2 copies of High Sentinels of Arasan. I mentioned this before. There's not a lot going on here that I really like. I think the 4 copies of Valorous Stance are fine. The 3 copies of Boon Satyr are fine for blocking, but not a lot of superstars in Corey's sideboard here for the matchup.
I think things are going to stay relatively the same here for both players. You just see him moving in some cards and moving out some cards in just a moment. I don't think a lot changes. I think, the matchup kind of dictates what can happen here, which is Boswell doesn't want to play a terribly long game, or we'll see what just happened to him, which is Corey's able to just kind of get settled and then take over the game with Master of the Unseen and a couple of other ways for him to stabilize. And Corey just wants to get to that longer game.
And it sounds almost silly to say, but, in the match we saw when Boswell was playing against Yurchik, how important Siege Rhino was, because the Green-White Devotion deck is so good at gumming up the ground that Corey is really good at trading with small stuff. He can also get to positions where he floods the board with a lot of stuff, chump blocks certain things, and then gets to a position to make a big play. And Siege Rhino makes both of those lines of play much more difficult. He's only got 5 power creatures to put in front of Siege Rhino to trade, and chump blocking is off the table as well.
Both these players going to shuffle up here for game number 2 in just a moment. Boswell will be on the play. Talk about a new card here from Dragonstar Tark here very quickly, however. Radiant Purge, a card that is rather good against some of the best cards in our current standard format. I think of a card like Siege Rhino. I think of Mantis Rider, and bevy other cards. Exile target multicolored creature or a multicolored enchantment. Instant speed. Nice answer for maybe a blue-white control deck.
I mean, if you go back to the last standard format, Renounce the Guilds was a fringe player, and that was an edict. This is targeted, so, I think this card is, definitely sideboard worthy.
Don't think it's ever going to be a main deck card. The format would have to shape up pretty strange.
Yeah, I think it's sort of in, we'll call it a race territory of every deck would have to have high impact targets to get to that point. Not to say that's impossible, because people have main decked Erase over the last couple of months. It happens from time to time, but I think it's kind of in that class.
And you take a look at the deck that Boswell is playing as far as multicolored creatures are concerned. Fleecebane Lion, Rashasha Death Dealer, and Offense of the Foremost, Siege Rhino. There are some targets.
Oh, it's great. It is great against Boswell's deck. The flip side, though, if you're looking at Corey, for example, his list is only playing with Fleecebane Lion. So it's not good across the board. It's really easy to point to the high impact cards in standard, especially Siege Rhino and friends, as being reasons why you would consider main decking this card. But it's probably too narrow for that on the balance. Though, if we got to a point where someone was playing a main deck Radiant Purge, I wouldn't be surprised.
No, I wouldn't be too surprised. Probably just one.
Yeah, right.
But, there's also been some talk of, maybe main decking a card like Glare of Heresy in this format, because white cards are seeing a ton of play and having a huge impact across the format.
Yes, and again, that's the metagame has to get to a pretty distorted place for that to happen, and Glare of Heresy really hasn't been incorporated in main decks, even though, as you mentioned, red-white aggro, the most, and Obzon, the 2 most played decks, and still Glare in the main deck is not something you really see.
I'm going to come back to the booth here really quickly as Corey is using the restroom. I don't think you guys want to stare at that table, so you get to stare at us instead. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan here from Miami. Star City Games bringing you this Grand Prix. Talking more about some of these cards that are coming with the news. We had a couple reprints as well. We talk about Radiant Purge actually being able to become multicolored creatures. Well, there's the opposite of that in Ultimate Price. It's coming back, and talk about the cards here in Boswell's deck: Fleecebane Lion, Death Dealer, and Offensive Siege Rhino. Well, that can't kill any of those. So I don't know how well positioned Ultimate Price is. It was really good in Mono Black Devotion, obviously, but different format. Formats dictate what you can and can't do.
Right, and I still think that card is going to be excellent. If it, not necessarily a main deck worthy card, then certainly in sideboards. Just 2 mana to kill a threat, and there's plenty of threats that it kills. That's just a really good deal in constructed Magic and standard, and so it's going to be all over the place. Probably some amount in the main deck and then a lot in the sideboard.
Now, I like that particular reprint, because before, when you and I were playing a lot, Smother was just kind of like the removal spell and it just kind of killed everything. Of course, it's 3 or less, but back then 3 or less was basically everything people were playing. And then Doomblade for a while was just, okay, I just get to kill every single card that you play. But now the removal spells in Magic, be it Radiant Purge, be it Ultimate Price, which is on its way back as well, those cards obviously the text matters and what they can kill and what they can't kill. So it informs your deck building.
Although it's interesting to me, I think that Smother kind of got a bad rap because of the consequences of its time. Those formats were flooded with so many good removal spells, especially Edict effects like Chainer's Edict and Innocent Blood, that playing 5-mana creatures was just nonsense. That wasn't a thing that you could do.
Yeah.
As a result, you had to play a bunch of cheap stuff, and then Smother looks like it kills everything. I think that if you printed Smother now, it would definitely be a powerful card. It would definitely show up in a bunch of decks, but you would get caught in spots where it didn't kill the thing you wanted to kill, as opposed to when it got printed in Onslaught, where Constructed Magic was just very different.
Yeah.
And creatures that cost more than 3 mana just kind of stunk. One, because R&D was less willing to print 4 mana 5/5s with powers like Pelucranos. And second, the removal and the counter spells were so efficient that playing with expensive stuff really wasn't something you could do.
I'd be surprised, for example, if we ever see a card like maybe Terminate get printed again.
Yeah, I think Terminate is probably it shows up all the time if you're going to put it in Standard, and it just means that a lot of your cards interact the same way, and your deck building choices matter a little bit less. Terminate's not the end of the world, but it's probably not the healthiest card to print.
I do just like that, we've gotten to that stage of Magic where, before certain stages, it was just, okay, well, I start with these 4 removal spells. There's really no consequence to me playing these. They're going to do what I want them every time. And now you have to pick and choose your removal spells correctly.
Yeah, I mean, even we have felt some consequences of Hero's Downfall. It has done some amount of you play 4 of these and it sort of homogenizes gameplay. And Hero's Downfall is a lot lower in power level than some of the other removal spells we're talking about historically. So it's an easy thing to mess up. R&D, by and large, the last couple of years have done a very good job with it. But if you mess it up, it can be really bad.
Boswell going to take a look at his opening hand here. He'll be on the play.
I'm honestly surprised by a reprinting of Ultimate Price.
I'm a little surprised, but I kind of like it.
Yeah. Printing of Ultimate Price also might be a way of trying to get some juice into morphs.
Sure.
Your morphing and your manifesting is pretty sweet if Ultimate Price is a removal spell that's floating around.
That's true. Bob's giving this one a long look.
Ultimate Price in a regular Standard format's probably going to kill most stuff, but in a format where there's a lot of gold stuff and you're trying to encourage morph, then maybe it's more situational than we might guess at first blush.
Looks like Boswell's going to keep his opening hand. Corey going to take a look at his. And he's going to go back to the well. So 6 cards coming here for Baumeister. You saw Patrick Chapin get up. Wasn't sure if he was walking with a match slip or not, so we'll see if we can find out there if he was able to win his match. He was 9-2 coming into the round. You see behind Corey Osip Lebedovich playing in a match. He's also 9-2. He's playing Mardu Aggro. So the big names of this tournament, and there are quite a few here, don't get me wrong, but they're having good tournaments.
And, by and large, playing different decks.
Yep.
Soul Tide Control, Osip with Mardu mid-range. Green-White Devotion against Abzan Aggro right now. I know Chad Castell is making a deep run with a Abzan Whip strategy. Mono Red is still hanging out with a possibility of a top 8 finish.
And we've just been informed that it looks as though Patrick Chapin did lose his match. So that'll be a 3rd loss for him. And out of top 8 contention now is the Innovator.
So it looks like Boswell has brought in the Nissas. There's one in his opening hand. What I like about Nissa is Nissa generates creatures with Trample, and Trample's very good against the Green-White Devotion deck.
Very, very good.
What I dislike about it is slow, and I'm not sure that Boswell is favored in a long game, even if he has access to Nissa.
Corey going to take another mulligan here, so he's going to go down to 5 while Boswell will wait patiently. See if he can find something a little bit better. But Boswell's deck is very good at closing out games early. That's what I've always liked about Abzan Aggro. It'll punish a deck that takes a mulligan or 2.
Yep, you don't have a lot of time. And the deck has some staying power too, so even if you draw out, you're not necessarily, for example, Abzan decks can mulligan to 5 against Mono Red, but draw Drown in Sorrow and win the game. There's no analog to that against Abzan Aggro. You still kind of have to fight things on a 1-for-1 basis.
Corey will look at 5. He's happy. Boswell going to start with Lana Royce, pass the turn back. Elvish Mystic the draw for Baumeister. And he'll start with exactly that off of a forest. Boswell picks up a copy of Fleecemane Lion. He'll have to take 1, and that's what he'll be casting. We'll head back Corey's way. Mastery of the Unseen the draw.
You can see a little bit of issues with Boswell's mana right now. A second Plains in hand, and Anafenza, which cannot be cast. Rakshasa Death Dealer, which cannot be cast.
There's Master of the Unseen. Baumeister's going to have to pay 1 to cast it. And we're going to head back Boswell's way. We'll see what his draw step is. Temple of Silence. That fixes the mana issues.
Well, with Glare of Heresy in hand, that's about as good as it gets because he has an opportunity to play the Temple, glare away the Mastery, still have a turn where he's interacting, get to black mana, scry. Good looking turn.
He's even going to leave the card on top, so Boswell's happy as we go back Baumeister's way. Master of the Unseen, the draw here for Corey. You see the Temple of Plenty in hand. Also has a Whisperwood Elemental. Remember, Baumeister did mulligan to 5 this game.
And Chapin's loss was to mono red. So
yeah, fair enough. Them there beat downs. We got it, you and Tom Ross working on mono red, man. When Dragon's Artillery comes here, Zergo Bellstriker, Lightning Berserker, that's all you guys.
It's an embarrassment of riches right now.
That's you too. Just an attack for 1. Passing of the turn. Boswell will take a draw. It's a copy of Abzan Charm. Fleecemane Lion going to come on in. The follow-up here is pretty good. It's an Anafenza. It's a Plains. Pass the turn back. Valor's Stance very quickly going to take care of that.
Yep.
It's pretty important for Corey, I think.
And you can see Corey elected not to play Master of the Unseen right now, that last turn, elected to leave up Valor Stance because he knows it's so likely with the 3rd land and now access to black mana that Boswell will cast something that he can Valor Stance. So just a really heads-up play there by Corey.
And Corey just taking the top card of his deck and putting it into play. It's a copy of Pelucranos. He's the 13. He'll pass the turn back to Boswell. Boswell's draw was another copy of Nissa. So 2 Nissas in hand, a Death Dealer, and I think an Abzan Charm that we're going to see cast to take care of the Pelucranos. Time to get on in. The beatdowns are consistent. Let's go back Baumeister's way. Looks like another copy of Whispered Elemental was the draw.
Some mana issues of his own over there.
Yep. That'll happen when you mold a 5. Even with how much mana this deck can generate. So there's a Master of the Unseen. Corey going to hang back on D with this Elvish Mystic. Boswell will take a draw. It's a copy of Manic Influence. That 5th land might be the one that seals it here because it turns on a lot of what he can do.
Right, this Nissa at this stage with Corey really choked on resources might be too much for Corey to overcome.
Yep.
Even with an untapped land and Whisperwood next turn, it's just going to be too much damage, too much trample.
Boswell attacks for 3. Baumeister going to go down to 5. No interest in Monstrosity. Would rather deploy the World Waker. Of course, that elevator goes up to 4. And now land's going to become a 4/4. It'll be a Plains. Baumeister will draw a card. It's a forest. That forest probably 1 turn too late, honestly. If he has that last turn, the narrative is probably pretty different. Here's Whisperwood Elemental. It'll manifest as well as Corey has to take 1 thanks to the Manic Influence.
But there's no blocking out of this now with Corey at 4.
Yep. He knows it. He's going to concede the game. So Andrew Boswell is going to win game number 2 here against Corey Baumeister. Abzan Aggro ties it up here against Green White Devotion. We'll get ready for a 3rd one. I don't expect a ton to change here on either side. I imagine they'll go back to the sideboards, but I expect a pretty quick shuffle and present and get ready to go.
What I'm interested about is, you saw the glares there in Andrew's deck post board. Now, unless High Sentinels came in, which I suppose is possible. Everything that Glare of Heresy kills, Back to Nature kills. And Back to Nature kills everything. So I don't know if Andrew necessarily knows the specifics of the Green White Devotion list. I don't know if he brought in Glare of Heresy alongside Back to Nature, but the most likely scenario, Glare of Heresy is just worse than Back to Nature in this spot.
So you're a Back to Nature guy.
I guess Fleecemane Lion, that's the one card. Glare can get a Fleecemane Lion.
That's true. That's true.
I don't know how much Boswell cares about that card specifically.
I think it's interesting. I think in some situations he does, some situations he doesn't.
Right, you know, it's hard for the card to be completely irrelevant because Andrew's ultimately trying to attack with creatures, but
Yeah.
it's not the highest priority most likely to get off the table.
And you see Boss is going to go back to the board. I think he's just going to take a look, make sure he's happy with his configuration, but I just don't think a lot changes on the player of the draw this matchup.
No, I don't think so either. I think that for Boswell, it's just an issue of what cards you want, what answers you want in your deck. I don't think play versus draw is much of a swing here. Same with Corey's side because he's got his cards that do stuff, and then he's got a lot of sideboard cards that don't really do very much. So I don't think we're going to see much shifting there either.
Well, taking a look again at the metagame breakdown here that was put together by Nick Miller. Obzon, 35 copies in a day two. If you group all the Siege Rhino decks together, there were 24 Obzon mid-range decks, 7 Obzon aggro decks. Of course, Boswell pacing the field, 3 Obzon Reanimator decks, and Craig Wesco's Obzon Mastery deck. If you haven't had the opportunity to take a look at that deck tech that Nick Miller did with Wesco in the sideboard, I recommend that should do. It's an innovative brew there from Craig. Red White aggro, 22 copies. Jeskai, if you group them all together, 11 copies in a day two, 7 aggro, 3 tokens, 1 Jeskai Heroic with Teamer Battle Rage. 10 copies of Blue Black Control, and then 9 copies of Green White Devotion. You throw in Corey, Brad Nelson, Michael Majors, Sam Black, that's 4. Ross Mayer, maybe number 5. A lot of players playing this deck, a lot of name players playing it, and it's having a really good weekend.
It is the breakout deck of this tournament, for sure. I mean, if you ask me what version of Green Devotion is going to show up here this weekend, I probably would have guessed Green Splash Red because we see that most frequently. I would have, my second guess probably would have been a splash of black and more of a Constellation shell. White would not have been my guess.
No. But this deck has demonstrated the power of Master of the Unseen. There was, of course, the match between Sam Black and Michael Majors where both players ended up above 400 life and drawing. That was a thing that happened. But Master of the Unseen, looked at as a sideboard card to begin with, certainly by myself, and I know many others. It's a main deck player.
Definitely in Nykthos shells, and Craig Wesco even doing some work with it in a non-Nykthos shell,
Yep.
which really surprises me.
Manifest turning out to be a better ability than I think us as a community thought between Whisperwood Elemental and Master of the Unseen. Both those cards great, and they're both in this deck.
Well, all Manifest is generate some morphs. So at that point, the rates on the cards determine it. Whisperwood Elemental's got an insane rate, and Master of the Unseen, specifically alongside Nykthos, can do some pretty crazy stuff.
And most would think the life gain on Master of the Unseen wouldn't matter that much, but it's very important.
I think R&D does a much better job now of making sure that there's a couple high water marks for every keyword, even if it doesn't facilitate a linear strategy, you know?
Ellis Mystic is how Baumeister started game number 3. Boswell, well, he's making a very loud statement starting with a Manic Influence. Yeah. He's going to be taking some pain this game as Baumeister plays a Sylvan Caryatid and will attack for 1. Boswell already down to 19. Boswell take a draw. It's a copy of Windswept Heath. He also has a copy of Caves of Koilos in hand. And all he can do is pass the turn back, so no 2-drop here either. Though if you see his hand, he does have copies of Valorous Stance, 2 of those, and then a Glare of Heresy. So he's got things to do if Baumeister does cooperate.
But this is also a really suspicious opening from Boswell here as well.
Sure, this deck having nothing to do on turn 1 or 2.
No lands that come into play tapped.
Yep.
You know, it just kind of indicates that there's probably something going on here, some sort of removal spell. Valorous Stance makes the most sense.
I don't buy it. There's an attack for 1. Corey gonna play a Forest. Master of the Unseen. Voyaging Satyr, pass the turn back. Boswell will sacrifice his Windswept Heath. No Ravnica dual lands to search up in this format. He's got to play a little more honest with just a basic Forest.
And it looks like Boswell has brought in Drown in Sorrow, so he's done some pretty heavy sideboarding here. And this would not be a bad spot to have Drown.
I don't hate it.
Kill 2 mana creatures wouldn't be bad.
Boswell will draw. Player of Heresy. Very reactive hand here for Boswell.
I believe he has Anafenza, so that's at least something to do.
He does. However, he's going to use Player of Heresy to get Master of the Unseen off the table, respecting just how powerful that enchantment can be.
Also, with Valorous Stance, he's got a generic big creature covered. And if Baumeister's hand is nothing but mana, Master of the Unseen starts going right now. So if Boswell's going to play a slow game anyway, he might as well cut off Corey's action. If Corey has a big creature to cast, that's fine. Boswell probably has it covered. And if he's got nothing but mana, he's very well served getting the Master of the Unseen off the table this turn.
Temple of Plenty here. Corey thinking about a scry. Thinking long and hard about it too, because I have to imagine he's wondering, what is in Boswell's hand? He's not doing anything.
Yeah, it almost feels like you're getting trapped into some sort of sweeper here or something. The way the game's looking right now doesn't make very much sense.
What, do you have any hostilities?
Also could be the kind of game where Andrew has a lot of removal and is playing towards something like Nissa.
True.
Just some singular threat that can win the game by itself.
They're the attackers, going to keep chipping away with these mana accelerants. The follow-up, well, how about another one? Now Drowned Sorrow would be a doozy. But that's not the draw. It's a Llanowar Waste. Looks like Urborg may be the land of choice here for Andrew. And it will be. All I can do is pass a turn back. So, does have Anafenza, but not willing to cast it.
Well, Corey left the card on top of his deck, so he's anticipating, I think, a big play this turn.
And there's the attack for 3.
And I think Corey might have left Valorous Stance on top of the deck.
These two jockeying for position.
The alternative is if Corey left a removal spell on top of this deck, this way Andrew can leave up Valorous Stance of his own.
Boswell going to take 1 to play Anafenza.
This is in contrast to all the other games that we've seen of this matchup, man. This has been an odd one.
This has been the weird one. Boswell going to take 1 here to Valorous Stance. The Valorous Stance. But Corey has a Fleecemane Lion. And the ability to play and activate in 1 turn.
Yeah, Corey can't do this fast enough.
And I wouldn't be able to either. That's a perfect spot to be in. He'll pass that turn back.
Look at Boswell's mana, you know. If he does not find Siege Rhino or some other similarly large creature, Fleecemane Lion could just run away with the game.
Well, Tasigur is a large creature. 5 toughness is certainly relevant here in this situation.
Yeah, it had to be something of this size, because if he just draws some random small stuff, the Fleecemane Lion creates a lot of problems.
Boswell with 3 cards in the graveyard. So he'd have to pay 3 mana to be able to cast it. Gonna play Temple of Silence to start. Top card, staying on top. And now Tasigur. Pass the turn back. We'll go about Monster's Way.
So a holding pattern right now is very, very good for Boswell. As he's
great,
the one with
actually.
Tasigur.
Yeah.
Other removal spells in hand as well.
He has Tasigur, and you mentioned the removal spells too. The removal spells play such a key role now because some of Corey's best draws are a large Genesis Hydra, Whisperwood Elemental, stuff like that. And Boswell's got a decent amount of that stuff covered right now.
Yeah.
Boswell just going to pass the turn back. Tasker activation at the ready. Tasker a 1-of here in Boswell's list. Might be proving to be worth it here. Baumeister going to start tapping some mana. Well, he's tapping a lot, so I think we know what's coming. Yes, it's a Genesis Hydra. It's for a lot. A lot is 8. So Corey will take a look at the top 8 cards of his deck. And he will take one and put it into play. And it's going to be a Wishwood Elemental. Corey shows off what he elected not to take. And Genesis Hydra among them. Of course, he has to shuffle these cards back in. And we'll see if Corey gets the opportunity to go to his end step and trigger Wishwood Elemental.
This is a really, really good spot for Valorous stance out of Andrew's deck, as he can take care of the Wishwood Elemental before there's a trigger and still have the mana left over to activate Tasker.
Boswell does have to kind of tread a little bit carefully just because he's dealing himself quite a bit of damage.
Yeah, he's being cautious. You saw he didn't play the Death Dealer last turn because it would have put him in a position where he would have had to take damage to activate Tasker. Now, this Whisper Elemental is threatening enough that he wants to do that now, but still this whole sequence only costs him 1 point of damage, which he has to take regardless because of mana confluence.
Somebody gets a Valorous stance back.
Good stuff.
That's a good turn. Because Tasker is a good card.
That very conveniently answers the Genesis Hydra.
It does. It also ensures that Boswell doesn't draw 2 lands.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff going on there.
Yeah. There's Fleeceman line. Pain-free. We'll go back Corey's way. Now it's starting to wonder, what's the best draw here for Corey?
Banishing Light on the table looks like a very good draw, but Andrew already has an answer rolled up with Glare.
Because I was thinking Master of the Unseen would be a good one, and Glare is what's causing the problems here.
Problem is that Andrew's hand is just a lot of removal right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of what would appear to be Corey's best draws don't do a whole lot. I guess Valorous Stance is probably Corey's best draw because he needs to get Tasker off the table.
However, Boswell having his Valorous Stance in hand.
Well, Boswell will probably have to use the Valorous Stance right now.
Get this Genesis Hydra.
Right, he can't handle the 8/8, so there's probably a 1, maybe 2 turn window where he could draw Valorous Stance and at least get back to a holding pattern.
Sure. Corey will pass the turn back. See Genesis Hydra exiled, thanks to Anafenza. Sandsep Citadel the draw. Boswell will very quickly put that into play. And he'll just pass the turn back.
Yeah, Sandsep Citadel's actually a pretty important draw there for Boswell. He needs more mana to be able to deploy stuff and activate Tasker, and he needs pain-free sources of mana. So it doesn't look like a big draw, but that's a nice one for Boswell to pick up.
Of course, we have Crewfix here for Baumeister. Top card of the deck is a Wishwood Elemental. Looks like Boswell will be activating Tasker. Let's take one to do it. Warden of the First Tree, Hero's Downfall, Valor Stance. Those are the options, Corey. Which do I get? Corey wants to take a look at Warden of the First Tree.
Creature dash human has no job, no employment.
Just a wild spirit.
Yep.
I wouldn't be scared of anyone that has no job either. You can have that.
Yeah. Not a human soldier or a human ranger,
No.
just human.
Urborg the draw. Already has one of those, though. Here's the human.
But Warden isn't bad here either.
It's not bad at all.
The game's shaping up to, Boswell's just going to be sitting here using Tasker and removal spells as required. Corey's not going to be really able to kill very much stuff. And Warden going all the way, not unreasonable.
I think it's possible Boswell, as he's going to replay an Urborg here, will shift his focus on what's important now and go the Warden route. It's not hard for him to get to the ultimate. He's clogging up the board, making it very difficult for Corey to be able to attack. And then Warden can take this thing over.
Keep in mind that unlike Figure of Destiny, you can spam the ultimate on this thing. Once you get to 6 mana, you can just keep going. So It doesn't matter really how much Corey gums up the ground. Warden can keep growing once Boswell gets to 6 mana.
Murderous Cut. He's going to take care of Whisperwood Elemental momentarily. Boswell leaving in his graveyard Cut and Valorous stance. Important, of course, because of Tasigur. But Boswell's going to decide, you know what, we're going to go the Warden route.
Which I really like in this spot, because Boswell would have had to take some damage here to activate Tasigur, and it doesn't impact the board, so he's at risk of getting squeezed out. This way he gets to go to level 2 with the Warden here. That makes it really hard for Corey to attack, because now he has a 3/3 lifelinker that's available, and then after that, we're going up to level 3, and it doesn't take too long for that to just be an insurmountable advantage.
A nice thing here, too, with the Warden is the amount of black mana Boswell has thanks to Urborg. It's pain-free.
Yes, he can just activate this as much as he wants, doesn't have to worry about taking any damage. And a 4/5 on top of a 3/3 lifelinker, if you go over and look at Corey's board, that's not something he can really attack through right now. For all the stuff he has in play, there's no profitable attacks.
Of course, our crew fix the top card. Windswept Teeth. Corey will trigger, gain a life. Moving underneath 6 minutes here, but things are favorable for Mr. Boswell as Warden of the first stream moves to level 2. Looks like Fleecebane line the draw. Don't know if he needs to put that into play, though. We'll see. He's reaching for some mana. Looks like he might just deploy another Warden with 6 mana available to go ultimate.
I've seen no one else so far go ultimate with Warden of the first tree besides Andrew Boswell, and I have seen it several times.
Yep. This will be the second or third time I've seen him do it. And he loves this card in this deck. When we saw him on the Open Series, he was playing a couple copies, and he had a much lower to the ground version. He's got the full 4 here. And this is the deck that typically starts things on turn number 2. Turn 1 will typically begin things with a Temple, or it'll begin things with a Sansep Citadel. But this 1-drop is so powerful in Boswell's deck that he actually kind of looks at it as a 2-drop that lets him play in the early game and the late game. My kind of Magic card. Corey going to be tapping a bunch of mana here. You see Whisperwood Elemental on top of the deck. He's up to something. And it's going to be Genesis Hydra. You're looking at 6 cards. You saw 2 Nykthoses, Corsair, Crewfix, Pelucranos, and 2 Whisperwood Elementals. He'll take one of the Whisperwood Elementals. Shuffle the rest back in, which Genesis Hydra requires you to do. We'll see the top card of his deck here in just a moment to Corsair. And that means the top card that we'll see to manifest.
So this is, not a bad turn for Corey by any stretch, obviously. He just made a huge Genesis Hydra, got a Whisperwood Elemental for his trouble, but Warden might be too much.
I think Warden is too much. Now, I don't think it's going to be too much on the first go. It'll be big, but it's the second time you activate it. Then it's almost insurmountable. But we're going to see Tasigur go here, it looks like.
Yeah, Tasigur is pretty charming here because there's 2 removal spells to take care of the Whisperwood Elemental or whatever else you're worried about. But there's a certain efficiency to just getting Warden up now.
And that's what it looks like Boswell's going to do. 5+1/+1 counters. So that's an 8/8 trampling lifelinker. And you can make it a 13/13 if you'd like.
So yeah, at this point, there's not a huge incentive for Boswell to make a move right now. As long as the game looks like this, even if Corey's generating a token a turn off of Whisperwood Elemental, eventually Andrew can overpower it.
Here's Nykthos. Corey going to gain a life. You see both players getting kind of a stalled board state here.
Now, Pelucranos on top of deck and possibly coming off this turn via Whisperwood Elemental, that does change some things.
Absolutely, it does.
Corey's got a lot of mana to work with.
Boswell going to activate again. 13-13 now. Yep, Corey going to take a look. He's a little rusty. He was playing when Figure of Destiny was around.
I was surprised by this too.
Yep.
I had no idea this was how that card worked the first time I read it, because I just assumed it was like Figure, but you can just keep going.
Pelucranos going to get turned face up. And I think the question is, how does this work, I suppose, in combination with the Whisperwood Elemental, perhaps? Well, now we're going to get a lot of mana here.
I think we may still be at the end of Andrew's turn here.
Yep. 13. Voyaging Satyr.
Yeah, Nick those into Pelucranos was basically the perfect set of cards here for Corey.
So this might be 27. Jeez. 28. 29. I've seen worse turns. $29 mana. He's going to use it all. So this is going to be for 14. 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 13. So he can kill, if he'd like to, Tassiger, Fleecemane, Anafenza, Death Dealer?
Or just the large Warden.
Yep.
I guess large Warden plus small Warden he could take out too if he wanted to.
I don't hate that.
I think from this position, if Corey knocks out Andrew's sources of card advantage, a potential line of play is he can just sit and wait for Banishing Light. He can build up a board where Boswell can't really offer up an attack, because Andrew is essentially gaining 5 points of power a turn if he just keeps activating into the Word on the first tree. Corey's likely to generate more than 5 power worth of stuff.
I think Corey just made a mistake with how he wants to fight there. So his targets were the large Warden, the small Warden, and the Death Dealer. And I think what he forgot to weigh into the equation is that, yes, it does have 10 counters on it. So it's not 11-11, it's a 13-13.
Yeah, that did not look right.
Yeah.
There's a couple of different paths there that Corey can take, and it's possible that there's something. Corey was anticipating that Warden being smaller than it actually was. And Boswell with the draw of Heroes Downfall. And now, if the Downfall takes care of the Whisperwood Elemental, we're back in a holding pattern where Corey can't really offer an attack, and Boswell's back to being able to activate Tassiger / dump mana into Warden as appropriate.
Corey's draw is a forest. The top card of the deck is a Genesis Hydra. So it's a bit of a tough break there for Baumeister. We're about to make our way towards turns here, too. So we might actually be working our way into draw territory. See the light totals here, 24-19.
Both players have amassed enough power to play that it's not inconceivable for someone to be able to attack for lethal, but I suspect we're not going to get through Corey's turn here because of the complexity of it before time expires. And so we're going to be looking at a pretty short game past that.
And here comes Santa Claus. It's just a 19-19. And it is turn 0 of extra turns now. So Boswell will get 1, 3, and 5. Baumeister gets 0, 2, and 4. And it is turn 0 right now. Fleece main line gonna chump block.
So yeah, Corey just gumming up the works here a little bit further. Still not in a position to really cobble together lethal, though Genesis Hydra does have some big hits next turn. This is a weird game because it doesn't feel, it's not super clear who has inevitability. I think at this stage, Corey's Genesis Hydra is going to be large enough that it's essentially Demonic Tutor.
Boswell's feeling comfortable enough that he can attack now.
And I think that might be the reason is that Andrew knows it's so likely that Corey finds Banishing Light or some other way to get rid of Warden off of this Genesis Hydra that he can't leave it back on defense. He's just got to get in there and get his life in.
That Warden's an 18-18. Trample lifelink. So a little bit of damage will come through here. But for now Boswell's basically out of range.
Yeah. Because he has the ability to chump block the big stuff. Nothing has trample. So if Corey's best shot here is huge Genesis Hydra, get a Banishing Light to take care of the Warden, I think Andrew can probably cobble together enough chump blocks on, the large Plukernos and the very large Genesis Hydra to at least get to a draw. Boswell also with Downfall in hand, too, so that's a lot of protection against one large threat.
There's 4 mana. He's thinking Tassiger. Now he's thinking Downfall. Now he's just unsure. He's just going to pass the turn back. Turn 2. Hydra with a draw. Top card of the deck, Glare of Heresy. Nykthos activation for a bunch of mana. Looks like 11 green.
So Corey gets this turn to attack and next turn to attack.
Yep, he's got to make the most of it. Here's a Hydra.
And Corey, again, just trying to noodle through here. How much mana and how large you can make this Hydra.
And how much mana to leave behind, too.
Yep. And the mana left behind is potentially a consideration because if he finds Plukernos, that might be something he wants to do immediately.
Yep.
Mastery of the Unseen, I suppose, as well, could be a factor.
Well, 17 is the Hydra and five green mana floating.
And that was not Banishing Light in the mix.
Valor Stance is in the mix. But that one doesn't matter, unfortunately.
Yeah. Polukranos looks like the best thing going on in this reveal. And it's tough to say, Polukranos with pretty close to unlimited mana against just an attacking and blocking creature deck is not going to be good enough, but Warden has just done that much.
So there's Polukranos, we think. Yep. So that means this Polukranos is going to bite the dust. It'll get exiled, of course, because the Anafense is in play. Top card's a Windswept Heath. Thanks, Courser. Glare of Heresy afterward. Corey going to sacrifice here. I think sacrificing now because he wants on the top card of his deck and be as informed as he possibly can be. He'll lose one, then of course gain one thanks to Courser, so net neutral. Top card, Valor Stance. Okay.
But no way to draw cards on the table here, and no cards in hand, so we can't get to it this turn.
And don't forget, 5 green mana floating.
Yeah, that 10-sided die there you see is tracking turn count here as it were an untimed turn.
So this will be an activation for 7, though Boswell does have a copy of Hero's Downfall in hand.
Yeah, and I think Boswell just wants to make sure that the Polukranos activation is such that it forces the Hero's Downfall.
Yep.
Because last time there was a bit of a misclick.
I think it is possible for Corey to actually win this game still. Before I didn't, but now I do. Going after Tasker. All right, that fight resolves. He's just going to pass. Setting it up for one big turn.
Yep. And basically what Boswell gets to do now is gain a bunch of life, 23, possibly 28, depending on whether or not he wants to activate, and hope that he can just chump out and use a removal spell to get to the draw.
Yep. This is turn 3. We've run out of dice, but we're making do.
Boswell also has another chump blocker he can throw into the mix.
Both creatures will attack. We're going to go for the big die now. So 21 counters.
So what I like about this attack here is it's basically just 1 point of life, but Corey is drawing Valorous Stance next turn, so Andrew has to attack with the Ward in the first tree.
Yep.
Because he has to attack with Ward in the first tree, the Anafense is now back on defense and vulnerable to just being killed. So at the point where you're attacking with Warden, you almost have to attack with the Anafense because it's 1 extra point of life, and the Anafense is not going to be available to block with. Because Corey can go untap Valor Stance your Anafense, attack with what I have.
Yep.
So because I believe Boswell's plan is just to play a Death Dealer here.
This is a Hero's Downfall to take care of a large Genesis Hydra. And now an activation.
Sure, this is the other way to do it. Yeah,
Yep.
This is all about trying to make Valorous Stance not matter for the purposes of what the last turn looks like. And this Warden now at...
There are 26 counters.
Okay.
Plus it's a 3/3. It's 29-29. And Boswell's going to distribute damage. What's interesting about this is, I think given enough time, I think Boswell would probably lose this game.
With Valorous stance coming, I think that would be the case.
Yeah.
But as it stands, this is going to be too much life, and I don't think Corey's going to be able to push enough back in the other direction, especially because so much of his board is collapsing on this.
He's going to lose a lot of it, yeah. Now Corey's able to deal 6. 5 is 11. 11 plus 7. Yep, so all this damage is going to be dealt. Warden's going to live through this combat. So maybe, well, nope, because then Valor Stance would take care of it. It's turn 4 now. Valor Stance to the draw. He'll kill that. And 66 to 17. Yeah, you can see Corey's just kind of shrugging his shoulders and says, I guess, I would attack with everything, but given the time, given where we're at, it's actually kind of tough to say who would win. Boswell would play a couple of creatures, has a Glare of Heresy left over. And these two players will shrug and probably draw, and that's exactly what it's going to be. So it looks like Andrew Boswell moves on to 11-1-1, and Corey Baumeister moves to 10-0-3, and all he can do is really shrug his shoulders in what was a really long, drawn-out, and strange Game 3.
Yeah, no, and it's still not even super clear who wins if we keep on going.
Yeah.
It feels like we just go to the next stage. That said, 3 draws for Corey now. Basically the same thing as having 2 losses for the purposes of points. Boswell now X1-1. Both players still certainly live for top 8.
A very, very weird third game there. We joined it with about 20 minutes.